Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our last baking show of the summer. Because it's our last baking show, we actually have two recipes for today's show. But we're going to start with the first one. The first one is a strawberry crunch ice cream cake. Now, I got this idea. Well, I didn't invent this recipe, but I wanted to make this recipe because I absolutely love the good humor strawberry shortcake ice cream treats that the ice cream man used to come around with. So, this cake is a spin-off of that kind of a dessert. So on the next screen, you're going to see an example of the ice pops that I like, the strawberry shortcake, good humor ice pops, and an example of the cake that we're going to make today. So this is going to be the first recipe, and then at the end, we'll do the second one. So take a look on the next screen, and then we'll come back, go over the ingredients, supplies, wash our hands, and get started. So on the left-hand side is the strawberry shortcake good humor ice cream bars that I was talking to you about. When the ice cream truck would always come through the neighborhood, this would definitely be my first choice. On the bottom right is a knockoff recipe or copycat recipe for this ice cream bar. This is what we'll be making today. Enjoy! You all had an opportunity to check out the recipe that we're making today in addition to the ice cream treats that I love. So let's get going on our recipe ingredients, the supplies, and then we'll get started. So being that this is an ice cream cake, I'm using store-bought strawberry ice cream and vanilla ice cream. Now, again, the brands don't matter. As you can see, I have two separate brands. Believe it or not, strawberry was pretty hard to find in the store. So we went with Breyers, which is a great brand. Anyway, we have that. We have whipped topping. We're going to be using golden Oreos for the topping. We're going to use our food processor that we used in the past. And we have freeze-dried strawberries, they're strawberries that are dried out and they're super crunchy. We're also going to throw those in the food processor to mix with the golden Oreos as our topping. It's going to be great. We also have to melt a stick of butter to mix with the crumbs from the golden Oreos to make the bottom layer of our cake. Okay, so that's really it for the food ingredients. For the cooking supplies, we have this is actually an 8x8. The recipe calls for 9x9, but all this means is this is just going to be a thicker cake instead of, a little bit wider. All right, but anyway, so I have my pan. I have parchment paper that we're going to cut and line this dish with. And then we have our measuring cups because we're going to be using a certain amount of cups for the ice creams. And we have our food processor. Okay, so we'll be using that also to crush up those Oreos and the freeze-dried strawberries. So that's about it. It's a pretty quick recipe to get started. So I want to get going because then we have that other fun recipe we're going to do too. Let's head over and wash our hands. As always, we're going to wash our hands. We're actually going to wash our hands twice. For the second recipe, we'll wash them again. So a little bit about this cake. We're going to be making a crust that we're going to actually have to put in the oven to kind of set. And then we'll have to let it cool before we put the ice cream on it because we're not going to want the ice cream to melt on top of that crust. But it's going to be really delicious, I think. I can't wait to make it. Who's ready to bake? I am. My hands are clean. So we're back. We are ready to bake. We are going to first, before we even line our baking pan here, we're going to preheat the oven to 350 degrees. While that's heating, we're going to line our pan with our parchment paper. We're going to make it a little bit longer because we're going to actually be using this to lift this out of the pan later once we're ready to cut it. That kind of okay. So again, it can overhang a little bit. That's fine. You can even sprinkle the sides a little bit. Okay, and once we start putting stuff in the bottom of it, it will stay down. So for right now, I'm just going to put my measuring cups, they're clean, on top of it to kind of hold it in place. So we're going to set that off to the side. Okay, so this is good for now. We used our parchment paper. Now we want to crush some of our Oreos. Just because I don't want these to melt, I'm going to just pop these in the refrigerator so they stay soft. The whole purpose is we want them to be soft so that we can work with it while putting it in the cake pan. All right, so first thing we want to do is we want to crush up some of our Oreos. So the recipe, we're gonna probably do about 20. So now we don't fit 20 in our food processor. We're gonna do increments of, let's say, 4 groups of 5. That way we can do it a couple times, and then we'll put the crushed Oreos in another bowl. And then once it's ready, then we have to melt our butter to mix it all together. So we're gonna just shift this a little bit so that we can go and put these cookies in our food processor. So as we said before, we're going to use our food processor to crush up our Oreos to make the crust for our cake. So I have a separate bowl that as we crush these cookies into like crumbs, we're gonna put it in there so that when we go to melt our butter, we can combine it all together. So as I said before, we're going to do increments of, we're going to do 4 groups of 5 because we would like about 20 to make that cake, that layer, that crust. So being that this is a mini processor, we're going to just do groups of 5, and then we'll be able to continue that process 4 times. So we have our 5 golden Oreos. Now, if you notice, I put a little mat under here just so that the crumbs, when I take the lid off, don't go all over the place. Looks so good. All right. Okay, get my bowl. Okay, that's 1 group of 5. We have to do it again. And again, we're going to do this 3 more times. 3 groups of 5 because we want a total of 20. Okay, halfway there. We're going to do this 2 more times. So we're adding in our last 5. Looking good. I'm so glad I put this little tape towel cloth here because there's all little crumbs. Okay, so as I said before, we are going to be using this food processor again, and because it's the same recipe, I'm not going to even rinse it. I just emptied the crumbs into our bowl, and we'll come back to this later in the recipe. But for right now, we're done with the golden Oreos for right now. Now we have our crumbs, and we need to melt a half a stick of butter, which is 4 tablespoons of butter. So I'm going to do that and pop it in the microwave to melt it, and then we're going to combine it with our crumbs to make our crust. So we melted our half a stick of butter. I have my spatula. I'm going to use that to kind of combine the crushed Oreos. And I'm going to use this because it's a little warm from the microwave. And I'm just going to drizzle this on top. Oh my gosh, it smells so good. Okay, like this. We're going to mix it up. And then we're going to grab our pan that we lined with the parchment paper. And this is going to be pressed down into the bottom to make the crust for our ice cream cake. Oh my God, it smells so great. It smells so great. Okay. So it's not too wet. It's just to kind of combine everything and make it a little thicker. Okay, so if you notice, I'm going to be able to press this directly into here. Now, again, because we're going to be cutting this later, even though the parchment paper, it's not going to stick, I am going to get some cooking spray to just spray before I put down the crumb mixture so that when we go to cut it later, it comes up even easier. Okay, so I have my cooking spray. And like I said, I'm just going to spray it a little bit just so that it comes out easier. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the crumb mixture and I'm going to kind of carefully put it into the bottom of this pan. And then we're going to use the spatula to push everything down so that it's all flattened like a crust. Again, it is going to be on the thicker side, which is fine. We're going to put it into our preheated oven. Remember, we preheated the oven to 350 degrees. If you want to bring it up the side a little bit, that's fine. My hands are clean, so I can use it to help scrape this off. Okay, you may even, just because your spatula, sometimes I like to spray with also the cooking spray too, so that the mixture doesn't stick to the spatula. Just a little light spray, and that prevents it from sticking too much onto the spatula. Little kitchen hack there for you. All right, so this is looking great. It's smelling delicious. I'm just going to continue pressing this. See, we're off a little bit. And if you even want to use your fingers, since they're clean, that's why you have to do a good job washing your hands before you start any kind of a recipe, because if you need to get your hands in there, no one wants dirty hands in their recipe, right? No. All right, this is looking fantastic. I'm going to just flatten it out a little bit more. Now, believe it or not, this crust has to cook for about 25 to 30 minutes. So I'm going to just do a little estimate in between the two numbers. Let's put it in for, let's say, maybe 27 minutes, and then we'll look at it to see, because we don't want it to get too burnt. We do want it to turn that golden brown. Okay. All right, I think it's looking great. Okay, so I'm going to hold this up for you to see, and then I'm going to go put it into the oven for about 27 minutes. Check it out. Okay, let's bring it over to the oven. So we have a few more seconds left on the timer here for our crust. When we pull out the crust, if it's good, we're going to let it cool on a wire cooling rack, so that underneath the pan gets nice and cool, the air underneath it too. So while we do that, we'll then head over to our workstation and prepare the topping for on top of the ice cream, because this has to cool before we put the ice cream on it. Then we'll do the ice cream, we'll freeze it. Another layer of ice cream, freeze it. So it's kind of like a freezing and then layering process, because it has to firm up. So we're going to stop the timer, and we're going to pull out our crust. Oh, yeah. Yum. Oh, it smells fabulous. So look, looking good. I'm going to leave it here to cool on the cooling rack. And let's go crush up our Oreos and freeze-dried strawberries. So our crust is cooling. We are now going to coarsely chop some remaining Oreos and our freeze-dried strawberries. Now, we are still going to use the food processor, but we're not going to make it as fine as we did when we were doing the crumbs. We're just going to kind of chop it a little bit so it's rough, because that's going to be the topping on top of the ice cream cake once it's done. So I have a bowl that, as we do it, we'll just transport the cookies and the freeze-dried strawberries into this bowl and just kind of mix it up so it's all together, and that'll stay off to the side. And then hopefully by the time that we're done making the topping, the crust will be cool and we can start our ice cream layering process. So I have about 12 of these now. So similar to what we did before, we're not going to do all of them at once. We'll break it in half. We'll do 6 and 6. And again, you're not doing finely, the fine crumbs. We're going to be doing it just like we're going to pulse it so that it like chops up the cookie into rougher, bigger pieces. Okay. So just so you can see the difference, the pieces are just a little bit bigger than the last time. We're going to repeat that process with the remaining 6 Oreos. Okay. Just so you can take a look at it. So as we said earlier in the recipe here, we're going to use freeze-dried strawberries. So I got these at Trader Joe's, but you can get them wherever. And what it is it's an actual strawberry that's freeze-dried. So if you look, they're sliced. You can't really tell, but listen. See, it's like a crispy, it's freeze-dried. So for the most part, these are already sliced, but we want to still get them a little bit more chopped. And we're not going to make it fine. We're just going to kind of probably hit the pulser button a couple times. Now, the recipe calls for about an ounce, which is pretty much this entire bag. It's a little bit less. The bag is a little bit more than 1 ounce. All right. Okay. And if there's some bigger pieces in here, you can kind of snap them with your fingers since our fingers and hands are still clean from before. So I'm going to repeat this process with a little bit more of this, and then we're going to get into mixing the crushed Oreos and the freeze-dried strawberries together. So inside we have the crushed Oreos and the freeze-dried strawberries. And again, you can kind of mash them up a little bit more. You see some bigger pieces in here, but it's not supposed to be as fine as the other one that we did for the crust. Okay, so this is going to be the topping. So we're going to just kind of mix it around so that all the flavors absorb. And then we will be topping this afterwards. So our crust is cooled, or cooling. We're going to start with our first layer of ice cream. So I have vanilla ice cream, and again, any brand, whatever you want is fine. So we wanted it to be soft so that we can spread it. So then what you'll do is we'll put it here, we'll put it in the freezer for a little while, then come back, then do the next layer. Put it in the freezer for a while, come back and do our top layer, put it with the crunchies on top, and then it goes back into the freezer until we're ready to serve it. Okay, so the recipe for the 9x9 calls for 3 cups of vanilla ice cream. We're going to start off with 2 because we don't want it to overflow past the top of the pan. And we have to make sure that we get that strawberry ice cream in there. So I'm going to start with 2 cups of vanilla to see kind of where that takes us. Now again, we have it softened so that it's easy to spread. Okay, so I think we're going to be okay actually with at least the 2 cups for sure. You might even be able to fit that 3rd cup. Like I said, it is soft, so we have to let it set up in the freezer before we add our strawberry ice cream layer. So I think what I'll do is I'll do a half a cup of this. That way it doesn't overflow. Yeah, a little bit more. I'm going to fill up half of this cup. We don't want to take away from the strawberry ice cream flavor either, and that calls for more than that. Okay. We're going to let that firm up a little bit before we add our strawberry ice cream. We're going to go put this in the freezer. So our vanilla ice cream is setting up nicely. We are going to now scoop some of our strawberry ice cream onto on top of this layer. Then we're going to top it with some whipped cream and then our crunchies, and then we're going to keep it in the refrigerator for at least 8 hours or overnight until it really firms up. I'm just going to get a spatula so that I can even it out nicely. Now this one really calls for a couple more cups than the vanilla since this is a strawberry shortcake ice cream cake. Okay. So there's about 3 cups of the strawberry ice cream now, which we want to kind of spread out a little bit before we continue. So the vanilla ice cream was there. Now we're layering on top of it with the strawberry ice cream. So it is a little bit messy just because the vanilla wasn't extremely firmed up just yet, but that's okay because now that they're all layered up, it's going to be able to really get better with the firmness as it sits in the freezer. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take our Cool Whip, and it does call for us to use the entire container. So we're going to top that. I'm going to layer it nicely. Again, I'm just going to use, since it's all going in there, I'm going to use the same spatula, and then we're going to use the topping that we made to top the ice cream cake. Delicious. Overflowing a little bit. That's okay. Clean it up after. Okay. All right, so now that this is all on here, we're going to add the crunchies on the top, and then we're just going to throw it back into the the freezer until we're ready to cut it open. Okay. Right, that's that. Now we get to take this and sprinkle it right on top. You can use your hands. It looks delicious. Look at this. You saw a picture of what it looks like once it's done and set up. Making a mess over here, but you know what? These are the best. All right. So toppings are on. It is now ready for the freezer. Okay? Let's just take a look. Look at that. Whoa. See the sides? I have to clean it up. That's okay. All right. So this is going to go in the freezer until we're ready to serve it. And then that's it for this recipe. We're going to take a picture of it cut nicely, and then you'll get to enjoy it. Stay tuned for your next recipe. Okay, boys and girls, this is the example of the second recipe we'll be making today. Oatmeal chocolate chip cheesecake bars. These look super delicious. I can't wait to try them with you. I hope you enjoy. As you saw on the previous screen, we are going to be making oatmeal chocolate chip cheesecake bars. So our hands are still clean from before. So what we're going to do now is we're going to just get into this recipe. So it calls for a 13 by 9 pan sprayed with cooking spray. Okay, so we're going to do that, set it off to the side, and then preheat our oven so we can get started with our mixture. Okay, just going to set this off to the side, and I'm going to preheat the oven to 350 degrees. Okay, so we are going to start with the crust for the cheesecake bars. So it calls for a package of oatmeal chocolate chip mix. Now, I only have the oatmeal mix, but from one of our recipes in the past, I have some of our chocolate chips that we're going to be able to combine. So what I'm going to do, now normally we add the ingredients that are listed on the back of the packaging. However, because it's a little bit of a different recipe and we're not actually making these cookies, we are going to be using what our recipe in front of us calls for. So we're going to be using this mix. I'm also going to measure out a cup of mini chocolate chips to make that oatmeal chocolate chip cheesecake bar mix. Take this. Okay. Do that. Whoops. Add that in. And then you can kind of just mix it up so that it's all combined. And I'll just use a wooden spoon and just do that for right now. Okay. So while our oven is preheating, we want to prepare, this is going to be the base layer of the crust. So we are going to, look at that, that looks great. So you have an option. You can buy the already packaged oatmeal chocolate chip. Like I said, I grabbed the oatmeal mix. So I'm just going to kind of add the chocolate chips into it. So when you have it all in there, you have it all together mixed up. Okay, so that is that. Now it calls for a half a cup of cold butter, which is a stick of butter. So what we have to do is we're going to be cutting it into little pads and we're going to then combine it using a fork. So it takes a little bit of time to kind of make sure that you combine it, and then we will stir in an egg until this mixture is crumbly. Then we're going to pat it down into our pan. So I'm going to get a cutting board and a knife so that I can cut these into slices and add it into our cookie mixture. So we have our cutting board, our knife, again, kitchen safety. You want to be super careful. I'm going to unwrap the butter. Now the butter is still hard because it just came out of the refrigerator. It calls for cold butter. So I am just slicing it up into little squares and I'm just going to throw it into my cookie mix. Because then what I'm going to do is with the back of the fork, I'm going to kind of combine it to make more of like a cookie dough. And then once that happens, then I'll be able to add our egg and really mix it around to combine to make our crust. Good. So all of our butter is used. We're going to just shift that over there. I need to just wipe my hand down real quick. So now just back of the fork, you're just going to kind of press the butter into the mixture. And you want to do that so that everything is going to be combined. So again, this is going to take a little time. So you just keep doing that until the butter has kind of mixed up with the cookie mix. And once we do that, then we'll get to add our egg into it. Okay, so cookie mixture here so far, the crust, however you want to label it, is pretty well combined with the butter. It took quite some time and a lot of muscle work to kind of get it to this point. So if you look, it's just a little bit more crumbly. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to incorporate one egg. So as always, I have my bowl that I'm going to crack the egg into, and then I'll add it in, I'll mix it up, and then we're going to use about 3 cups of this mixture. I would say this mixture is probably anywhere from like maybe 3.5 to 4 cups, because what's going to happen is we're going to use the majority as the crust, but then we're going to take the extra and sprinkle it on after we add our cheesecake layer. So right now, I'm going to stop with the fork. Okay, I'm going to now add my egg. Okay, it goes in. We use our wooden spoon from before just to kind of combine it. Again, you want to be careful. You don't want to have any of the crumbs go on the out, make the crumbs come flying out of the bowl. This just makes that mixture that you had come together a little bit more with the liquid from the egg. Okay, so what we're going to do, it says we're going to use about 3 cups. So you don't necessarily have to use your measuring cup, but you can kind of estimate it. I'm probably going to use it just as a guide. And then the goal is just to make sure that you have some extra crust left over or mixture so that you can sprinkle it onto the top after you put the bars together. So I'm going to just get my prepared 13 by 9 glass pan that we sprayed before with the cooking spray. I'm going to use the measuring cup, and I'm going to now put this into the bottom of this pan. So again, you don't want to pack it in. You just can kind of, again, you estimate it. So we're going to use about 3 cups of this. 1, 2, then last third cup, third. Okay, so now put this off to the side because we'll come back to that in a moment. So we have it here, and we just want to press it down into the pan. Now, like we said before, sometimes with the spatula or the wooden spoon, if you're using it to kind of push down different batters or cookie mixtures or whatever it is, it may stick. So if you have the option to spray it with cooking spray, or since our hands are clean, you may want to just push it down with your hands to kind of create that crust layer. Okay, and you want to evenly distribute it as best possible. This is going to be the base layer. So now the oven went off, it's preheated and ready to go. So what's going to happen is we're going to bake it for about 15 minutes, just so that it gets a little firm and all this kind of combines. Okay. Okay. Good. So we have our crust here. Let me just kind of wipe my hands off a little bit. So it's flattened down at the bottom. And like I said, we're going to put it in the preheated oven. Yes, for about 15 minutes. So while this is in the oven, we're going to prepare the cheesecake layer for going on top of this. So let's go throw this in the oven now. As always, we're carefully putting on our oven mitts because we've been, using our oven safety all summer long. So I'm going to throw this in the oven. And I'm going to set the timer for 15 minutes. So we're going to go back over to our workstation and get situated to make our cheesecake filling for on top of the crust. So our crust is in the oven, it's baking, it's starting to smell really good in here. Now we get to do that middle cream cheese cheesecake layer. Okay, so it calls for some sugar, eggs, cream cheese, and then vanilla extract. So what we'll do is we'll start with the cream cheese. It calls for 2 8-ounce blocks of cream cheese softened. So I had mine sitting out at room temperature while we were doing the other recipes. So now it's nice and soft. So this is going to go right in the bowl. And then we'll get the other 8-ounce block. Look at that. That was easy peasy. One. And we'll do the second one. Calls for a cup of sugar and then 2 eggs. So then once we have that in our mixing bowl here, we will bring it over to the electric mixer. Oh, and then a teaspoon of vanilla extract. Cannot forget that. Okay. Cream cheese is good. Let's do our cup of sugar. Okay. So we have, I'm going to kind of use this to kind of just get some extra, just because I couldn't get all of it at once. Okay, so we have our cup of sugar. Now we need to do our 2 eggs, and as always, we're going to use the same little ramekin we used from the crust. We're going to crack the egg in it. No shells. Woohoo! Got one. We'll do our second egg. Okay, look at that. 2 times. Actually, I did 3 times no egg shells. Okay, whoops. And then last but not least, our teaspoon of vanilla extract. Perfect. So this is ready for the standalone mixer. So let's go bring it over there now. So we're at our standalone mixer. Our crust is still in the oven. It still has a few minutes left. So I am going to lock this in place. We have all the wet ingredients and the sugar that we just combined over at our workstation that we are going to now use the electric mixer on a low to medium speed to make sure it combines. And you want it to be smooth and creamy. Okay, so I'm just going to start off slow. I want to make sure that those eggs get all combined with the sugar and cream cheese. Okay. So we're gonna let that go for a little while and then it'll turn really creamy and then it'll be ready to spread on top of the crust by the time the crust comes out. So it's looking super creamy. So we're gonna stop it, unlock it, okay, spatula. So I'm gonna undo this because it's so creamy. It's just gonna come right off this paddle, but I'm gonna use the spatula to kind of assist it. And then I'm gonna drop this in the sink and we're going to bring our mixture over to our workstation because our crust is almost about ready to come out. Once it comes out, we'll put this on top and bake it. So the timer has about 10 seconds left. What we're going to do is we're going to pull it out, and it's not like a regular cake where we have to make sure that the batter comes out. I'm sorry, the toothpick comes out clean because it's going to be going back into the oven to bake after we put our cream cheese and then the dollops of the remaining batter. So I'm going to put my oven mitts on and I'm just going to remove this from the oven now. Look at that. All right. So we have our crust. I'm going to leave the oven on because we're just going to prepare it with the stuff we just made and return it back to the oven. But I am going to take this over to our workstation on top of two, they're called trivets, to make sure that the hot pan doesn't do any damage to my surface. But we need to work on it. So I'll bring it over there, put it on top of a dish towel and the two trivets, and then we're gonna put the cheesecake mix on it and the dollops of the remaining cookie batter to return to the oven to make our bars. Our crust mixture is here. It's cooling. The pan is very hot since it just came out of the oven. So I'm going to make sure that I'm super careful when putting our cream cheese cheesecake spread on top and then the remaining batter onto that. So you're going to be able, it's a creamy consistency, so it will spread nicely. So you can kind of just like drop it on top of the crust and then we'll spread it with the spatula all around so that it's evenly distributed on top of the crust. Cheesecake is probably one of my most favorite desserts of all time. I love cheesecake. Cookies. Who doesn't like cookies, you know? So it's the best of both worlds. We got cheesecake basically on top of an oatmeal chocolate chip cookie, basically. All right, that's that. Now I'm just going to carefully spread this on top of the cookie mixture, the crust. Okay. Now, again, the pan is hot. Just kind of shifting it all around so that the bottom of the pan, well, the cookie mixture is covered. Okay, so that's great. That looks delicious. So this is, like I said, going to be going back into the oven to bake for an additional 25 to 30 minutes. But before we do that, I have a spoon. I'm just going to take what's left and kind of drop it on top of the mixture. And it's just going to add almost like another little crust on top. And it doesn't have to be perfect. You can kind of just drop it sporadically, however you feel, whoops, comfortable doing it. So again, if you don't like oatmeal and you just want to do a cookie, you know, a chocolate chip cookie mixture, you could do that. Okay. Kind of just using my hands now. Okay. So now, like I said, we're going to bring this back over to the oven. We're going to bake it for an additional 30 minutes. You want to make sure that the cream cheese filling, the cheesecake filling, is cool. Some of these are big, so we're going to kind of move them around. Okay, and you can kind of just sprinkle so that because there's some loose pieces in here, kind of just sprinkle them around so that this is all on top of the bars. I think it's going to taste delicious. That's just me. Okay. So again, let's go throw this right into the oven for about 30 minutes and we'll check it out at that point. So our timer has a little more time on it. What's going to happen is when we pull out the cheesecake bars, we're going to want to make sure that the top of it looks firm. So we don't want it to be like super liquidy. And then once we pull it out, it needs to cool out here for 30 minutes. Then it needs to be refrigerated for 2 hours before we're able to cut it and try it. Oh, wow. This. Okay, so now as it sits, it's going to cool and it's going to kind of settle a little bit. Right now, it's kind of puffed up. So we're going to set the timer for 30 minutes. We're going to let it cool for 30 minutes. So that's the timer. Even though this has been cooling for 30 minutes out here, I'm still going to use my oven mitts just to be careful because it's heavy. And if it were to be too hot, I don't want to drop it after all this hard work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open the refrigerator and then we're going to let this cool for about 2 hours before we can cut them into bars and have a taste. So again, 2 hours, it's going to stay in the refrigerator. So we'll check back in on those bars in 2 hours. Our cheesecake bars have been refrigerated and they are ready to be sampled. So you have the option of just cutting it as you go, like cake, or you can make them into bars, whatever you want to do. So I am just going to take a corner piece here. It's going to be hard to get this one out, I think. So I'm going to get a server. Hold on. Okay. Just kind of, first one's always the messiest. Scoop it out. Not too bad. All right. So I'm going to put it here. And let's see. It's good. Oatmeal chocolate chip cookie meets cheesecake. Delicious. Anyway, boys and girls, this is our last baking show. I had so much fun baking with you this summer. I hope you all had fun too. Don't forget to be a food critic one more time after this, and I hope you have a great rest of your summer, and I'll see you in September. Bye. Okay, boys and girls, what we're going to do here is this is going to be the final thing that we'll do at the end of every recipe that we create. This is something that kind of rates our recipe. It'll tell you what you thought of what it looks like, how it tastes, what it smells like, texture. You get to be the food critic. Now, what a food critic does is a food critic rates all those different areas of a recipe. You guys are going to be able to be the food critic based on my recipe. Now, if you don't make it on your own, you can imagine what you think it might taste like and smell like and the texture of it. We can just focus on the visual representation then, what it looks like. And then what you could do is on a plate, not a real plate, you can draw a circle to represent your plate. You can draw your recipe. And then there's going to be some questions that I want you to take a look at. One, would you make the recipe again? Two, if you could change something, what would you change? So these are the things that I want us to focus on at the end of every baking video. So I want you to take a few minutes and copy this down on a piece of paper or do it on a Google slide, anywhere that you want. You get to read the recipe. Just a reminder as you're working on this, for rate the recipe with the different stars. If you notice, all the stars have different faces on them to indicate if you're not happy with it, all the way to very happy with it. So make sure that you circle which one best fits the different category. Great job today. I hope you enjoyed. See you on the next video.